Yikes. That was my reaction when I was looking at Georgia's offensive stats in 2024 and comparing them to the last few seasons. The offensive regression from 21 to 22, 23, those 3 years were great. It regressed hard in 2024 in pretty much every major category. The numbers just were not as good. And when you think about it, when I sit and I reminisce, as it is my job to do, on this past season for Georgia, I think a lot about how the offense was dull at certain moments. It was dysfunctional at certain moments. And it lost them some games. That's just the truth of the 2024 Georgia Bulldogs. The defense has had, right? Now it's past tense, had a lot of future NFL talent. So did the offense, but the defenses like that are not as common. And Kirby, Glenn Schumann, that defensive staff continues to pump out very good defenses, continues to coach very good defenses. They shut down a lot of really good offenses this year in certain moments. They shut Tennessee down for the most part. They shut down Clemson completely altogether, an offense that was pretty good against the rest of the competition that played in college football. You get my point. It was the offense that held Georgia back. I want to show you these numbers. I want to talk about a lot of things. I want to get to what are they doing to fix it, because I do think Georgia recognized its problem and is trying to revert back to the way it was a couple of seasons ago, because if it does that, you have a lot of faith in a Georgia defense and a Kirby Smart defense to get that right, even though they have to plug and play certain pieces, even though that it's losing a lot of guys. This defense will not feature anybody from the championship teams now. It is moving on from that. Chaz Chambliss, Dan Jackson, Malachi Starks, Jalen Walker, Michael Williams, all those guys, Smile Money, they're gone. And it will be a new defense for the most part, but it's the offense, to me, there's a problem. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post, I'm going to go ahead and show you numbers right now. And let's start with 2021. 2021, this is a national championship team. ESPN does a great job laying out all of these numbers, so credit to them. 38.7 points per game, 581 total points. Let's just kind of mark some of these numbers down in our heads here for a second. Passing, 3,700 passing yards, 9.3 yards per pass attempt, 250 yards per game. This was a Georgia team that wasn't as good offensively as the two teams I'm going to show you next. But look, almost 3,000 rushing yards to go on top of that. It was an efficient rushing team. This is a team that had Zamir White. It had James Cook. Those guys were seniors. It had Kenny McIntosh as the RB3. It had Kendall Milton as RB4. It had Stetson Bennett and his legs. These are really good offensive numbers. Close to 40 points per game. That's very, very good. So you move over to 2023, or 2022 rather. This is the undefeated team. This is the back-to-back season. Even better on offense, right? The defense slightly regressed, which it was an all-time defense in 2021. The defense slightly regressed, but it was made up for with this insane offensive production. Net passing yards, 4,400, 9 yards per pass attempt, 31 passing touchdowns against 7 interceptions. They ran for 3,000 yards while also having the best passing season in Georgia history, and that was Stetson Bennett in his Heisman finalist season. These defenses were really good for Georgia, and you couple that with the offense production you see in 21 and 22, those are championship teams. These are championship numbers. In 2023, the championship numbers on offense continued. They continued. What happened to Georgia in 2023? It lost to Alabama by 3 points in the SEC championship, and it was stiff-armed out of the college football playoff right there. And that's the way it went down. They go on to have the best bowl win in history over Florida State, but they fell short of a championship. But I think to me and to a lot of people in the know, the 2023 Georgia Bulldogs were a championship quality team. It lost a game, unfortunately. A game against a team that I thought it was better than. And in hindsight, I still think that Georgia was better than Alabama team. They got outcoached. They got outplayed on that day. 40 points per game in 2023. This is a team that had an opportunity to 3-beat. Over 4,000 passing yards. Still hit a really nice rushing yards mark. You see that 9.4 yards per attempt. That's a good indicator of an efficient passing offense. Over 300 yards per game. You see all of the touchdowns. You see the total plays. So, what happens when you get to 2024? Here it is. Harsh regression. We're talking about a touchdown regression here in points per game. A whole touchdown. Passing yards. That number that was in the 9 to 10 range is now under 8. Not as many touchdowns, more turnovers, right? A lot of that is on Carson Beck, but Georgia's offense as a whole didn't function. And then you see another drastic drop-off, the rushing. 4.1 yards per attempt, 1,742 yards. They didn't run as much, but they didn't run as efficiently either as it did in the past. Georgia's offense regressed hard in 2024. This is the unit that needs to get figured out over the offseason. I don't think that Kirby would disagree. The numbers are proof. The eye test was proof. Like, to put it simply, the eye test was proof. I'm pulling their schedule up and looking through, so it's easier for me to discuss this. But I'm not going to just sit here and talk about every single game like I do in some videos, but just quickly run through times where the offense couldn't function. The first half against Clemson in that opening game, right? Georgia explodes in the second half. That's great, but the first half against Clemson, that's my response to that. Kentucky, it was dysfunctional. It turned the ball over. They couldn't get anything going through the air. It took a few really nice runs at the end of the game for them to win that game. And that game was won with defense and keeping Kentucky out of the end zone, a 13-12 result. First half against Alabama, Carson Beck turns the ball over 3 times. 4 times, maybe. Now I'm starting to blank on how many of those turnovers were in the first half compared to the second half. They get down 30-7. And they have to come back. They end up losing that game, really close game, in what was the game of the year. But another half of football where it's just completely dysfunctional on offense. Auburn game was fine on offense. Mississippi State game was fine on offense, despite some turnovers. Against Texas, they went and they couldn't pass the ball. They couldn't. And Texas was one of the best defenses in college football this past season, but they couldn't pass the ball. Florida, first half, largely dysfunctional. 3 turnovers. They were bad turnovers. Carson Beck is a common denominator in a lot of this, although I want to keep reminding y'all that it wasn't all just on Carson Beck. And then you get the Ole Miss game. 10 points on offense. They scored on their first drive, which was on a short field, created off of an interception by Dan Jackson there on the first possession for Ole Miss. Georgia goes down, runs a touchdown in with Trevor Etienne, and that's it. That's all Georgia did offensively. It could not move the ball that day. 106 passing yards from Carson Beck, 47 yards from Nate Frazier on the ground. It's the second game where Georgia only mustered 1 touchdown, both of them being on the ground. You fast forward, Texas first half was bad. Georgia Tech first half was bad. I'm talking about Texas SEC championship game. They could not function on offense. Georgia did not score in the first half. Did not score a touchdown in either of those games in the first half. And then you get into the Notre Dame game, the game that it lost. It's another game where it only scored a singular touchdown. They only scored 10 points. There's 3 games this season where they only scored a touchdown. This is a Georgia offense that had Carson Beck, who's supposedly a future NFL quarterback, that has speedsters like Arian Smith, that had future NFL players at every single position, that could only muster a single touchdown in 3 different games. It is the offensive side of the ball that has to get better. Kirby Smart will scheme good defenses. Whether the players are extremely elite or not, that side of the ball is always going to be one that you're not super worried about. And while there were games this year where Georgia allowed a lot of points, part of that was because of the struggles on the offensive side of the ball. How is Georgia going to fix this? I think that they've attacked it through the transfer portal. Carson Beck's out. Trevor Etienne's going to the draft. 4 out of the 5 starters on the offensive line are going to the draft. Arian Smith's gone. Dominic Lovett's gone. This offense is going to be looking very new. It's going to be different. That right there is the first step in trying to make things better. We don't know if it'll be better or not, but on paper, they're trying to do that. They went out, and in this class, they signed a lot of offensive talent. They signed guys that you think could be difference makers at some point. Wide receivers like Taylon Tabor and C.J. Wiley, true freshmen, and they're incoming freshmen. Some tight ends to add to that pipeline. Obviously, a lot of good offensive linemen. And then in the transfer portal, they went out, they got Zachariah Branch. He was a number 1 transfer receiver. He's a former number 1 overall receiver in the 2023 high school class. He's a 4-star transfer, a 5-star high school prospect, an explosive player. They went out and they got Noah Thomas, a 6'6", pretty crafty and pretty good big wide receiver on the outside from Texas A&M. They went and they attacked it, and they will have a new quarterback, likely Gunnar Stockton, unless Ryan Puglisi pushes for the job, or there is a late transfer that I don't know about and most don't know about at this point. But Georgia did attack this. Kirby did attack this problem over the offseason, but it needs to be fixed if they want to compete for national championships. National championship teams typically have very good offenses. What did we just see from Ohio State? We saw an offense that could do everything, that had players like just a stacked offense. Jeremiah Smith, Trayvon Henderson, Emeka Ibuka, NFL offensive linemen, multiple NFL running backs. Very good defense, and the relationship with the offense and the defense being very good matters a lot, but you can't do it with a bad offense. Michigan in 2023 is probably the worst offense of the last few years that won a national championship, but from a rushing standpoint, it was elite. They ran for a lot of yards. They ran for a lot of touchdowns. Blake Corum himself had over 20 touchdowns that season. 21 Georgia, very good offense. 22 Georgia, elite offense. 20 Alabama, elite offense. 2019 LSU, elite offense. 2018 Clemson, very good offense. 2017 Alabama, very good offense. You get the drift. You need it on both sides of the ball, and Georgia only had it on one side of the ball this past season. That's why it fell short and lost to Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl, along with some other things. But my focus today was on the offensive side of the ball. It's got to get better. It's got to get better. Thanks for watching.